Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I never had to answer for myself. That was the creed I grew up with, whispered to me like a sacred secret. Freedom, I was told, was a woman's most precious asset, and true love would always respect that. It would never try to cage you. When I met Silas, I believed I had found the living embodiment of that philosophy, and I took the idea to its absolute limit. He was kind, attentive, and he trusted me with a depth that felt, at times, like a vast, open ocean. He never questioned where I was, or who I was with. His love wasn't a leash. It was a horizon. To anyone else, it would have been the ideal relationship, the kind of partnership people write novels about. But for me, the lack of demands turned into an empty space, a space where temptation could echo, and I gave in more easily than I ever imagined I could. It all began in whispers, not shouts. Small things, harmless things, I told myself. A quick, lingering smile shared with a stranger in the elevator. A compliment from a colleague, accepted with a little too much satisfaction. Messages exchanged outside of work hours. Conversations that danced on the edge of appropriateness, filled with jokes that Silas would never understand. Inside, I could feel something fracturing. A tiny, hairline crack in the foundation of us. It's just vanity, I would reason, staring at my reflection after a night out. A passing neediness, a mistake without consequence, but it was a weed, and it kept growing. I began to cultivate a secret garden of conversations. I made up excuses to go out alone, cloaking my evenings in the vague armor of work events or catching up with old friends. And when I found myself surrounded by looks that desired me, looks that saw me not as Silas's Elara, but just as Elara, a woman untethered, I didn't resist. It was a drug, a constant, desperate search for confirmation that I was still wanted, that I still held power over men other than the one who held my heart. And through it all, Silas remained steadfast, loving. He believed in a love built on total trust, thinking I was the kind of woman who valued that above all else. I used his belief as a shield. Whenever the sharp edges of guilt pressed too close, I would run back to him. I'd surprise him with an improvised dinner, his favorite meal. I'd touch his arm tenderly in the middle of the day. I'd kiss him with a passion that felt almost like a penance. I tried to erase my conscience with gestures of affection. And he received them all with such open, unsuspecting tenderness. He believed we were building something strong, real, eternal. So when the marriage proposal came, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. We were walking by the river, the city lights blurring into watercolors on the dark surface. He stopped, took both my hands in his, and his voice was thick with an emotion so pure it almost hurt to hear. As he spoke, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Each beautiful word he said about our future was another twist. But I smiled. I let the tears he thought were of joy well in my eyes. And I accepted. I told myself this could be the turning point, the mark of a new phase. Maybe a formal commitment, a ring, a vow, a shared name was the anchor I needed to stop drifting, to finally, truly change. And for a few weeks, I almost convinced myself it was true. I started avoiding unnecessary outings. I ignored messages I once would have replied to immediately. I even distanced myself from a few contacts, creating a polite but firm boundary where before there was an open door. But I wasn't dealing with the root of the problem. I was only masking the symptoms. The temptation, I learned, never truly goes away. It just waits, and it returned with a vengeance on the night before my wedding. We were in different cities that weekend. He was back home, dealing with last-minute details for the reception, coordinating with family. I was a few hours away for a mandatory team-building event, a final corporate gathering before I took my leave for the honeymoon. It was supposed to be a normal night, professional, uncomplicated, but between the toasts and the forced laughter, a manager from another branch, a man named Griffin, got too close. It started with a dance. I accepted, thinking it would be rude not to. Then came a whispered compliment in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. Soon, we were slipping out the back of the hall, the muffled sound of music following us into the cool night air. He told me I was making a mistake. That marriage was a cage. He said a woman like me, a woman with such a fire in her, shouldn't be tied down. And I listened. God help me, I listened. When I finally returned to my hotel room, the sky was already beginning to pale with the first light of dawn. It was too late. I sat on the edge of the bed for almost an hour, staring at my reflection in the dark television screen. A stranger in a wrinkled cocktail dress stared back. I asked her, I begged her to tell me why. Why would you do this to someone like Silas? To the only man who had ever shown you what unconditional love looks like? She had no answer. That morning, I put on the white dress, as if I were putting on armor. It felt heavy, restrictive. I walked down the aisle holding a bouquet of white lilies, and my hands trembled so badly I was afraid I would drop them. On the outside, I'm sure I looked beautiful, serene, a bride in love. Inside, I was broken. Utterly, irrevocably broken. When I reached the altar, Silas took my hand. His was so warm, so steady. He squeezed it gently and leaned in to whisper, I've been waiting for this moment since the day I met you. I had to swallow hard to keep from choking. I faked a smile. I said the vows. I said, I do. And in that instant, standing there in a church filled with people who loved us, I made a decision. I would erase everything. Everything I had done before this moment would be locked away in a vault, never to be opened again. I wanted to believe I needed to believe that I could become someone else from that point forward. I thought Silas's love was a kind of magic, that it was strong enough to heal the wounds I had inflicted upon myself, that his purity could somehow cleanse my sins. During the reception, I kept up the appearance. I was flawless. I danced with our guests. I kissed Silas in front of the cameras. I toasted with our parents, and I smiled as if I was the happiest woman in the world, certain and secure in the life I was choosing. But the truth was, the weight of the secret I carried was suffocating. Every time I looked at my new husband, at his honest, smiling face, a voice in my head screamed that he deserved better, so much better. And yet, there I was, starting a life with him built on the ruins of my wrong choices. Part of me wanted to confess, to shatter the whole charade right there on the dance floor and end everything before it truly began. But the other part, the part that always preferred the safety of silence, the illusion of control, that part won. It always did. And so, our marriage began. With a yes poisoned by lies. With a one-sided love, because his was whole and mine was fractured. And with a woman who still didn't know how to stop running from herself. Everything looked perfect on the outside. But deep inside, I was already living a conflict that, sooner or later, would demand its price. In the first few months after the wedding, I made a genuine effort. A desperate, almost frantic effort, as if I was trying to make up for something he didn't even know he had lost. I threw myself into the role of the perfect wife. I'd wake up early, the sky still a deep indigo, and carefully prepare his breakfast. The smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread filled our small apartment. I'd choose loving words when I said goodbye, kissing him at the door and holding on for an extra moment. Our social media became a curated gallery of happiness. Photos of us smiling on weekend hikes, clinking wine glasses at dinner, cuddled on the sofa. I wrote captions filled with declarations of my love and luck. To anyone watching from the outside, we were the perfect couple, the ones who had it all figured out. I even avoided gatherings where I knew Griffin or other flirtatious coworkers might be. I told myself it was a fresh start, a clean slate, and for a while, it felt real. Silas, meanwhile, seemed completely fulfilled. He was finally living the life he had always dreamed of. A shared home, plans for the future, a routine built on companionship and security. He saw in me everything he had ever wanted in a woman: devotion, care, complicity. He saw the woman I was pretending to be. During this time, we rediscovered some simple pleasures. We spent nights playing cards, our laughter echoing in the quiet apartment. We cooked together, bumping hips in the kitchen. We rewatched old black and white movies, and we planned trips to places we'd only ever seen in magazine. I smiled often, but there was always something behind that smile. A tiredness, a strain she tried to hide. As the days bled into weeks, and weeks into months, that effort started turning into exhaustion. The performance was draining me. I began to feel like I was acting a role, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The regret from the night before the wedding no longer felt like a sharp, acute pain. It had settled into a dull, constant ache, a ghost that haunted the quiet moments. I believed if I just pushed hard enough, I could bury that past and maintain this new version of myself. But daily life, real life, started taking its toll. Silas's shifts at the hospital increased. My work demands became heavier. The easy, Flowing conversations we used to have were replaced by tired summaries of our day. The spontaneous gestures became rare. I no longer had the energy to wake up early to prepare his coffee, and many times, he was so tired he didn't even notice. We started drifting apart, not in a dramatic, explosive way, but in a slow, silent, almost imperceptible drift. Small frustrations emerged. The wet towel he left on the bed, forgetting an important date I'd mentioned. Fatigue being used as an excuse to avoid the deeper conversations we needed to have. Silas remained kind, of course. That was his nature. But he no longer showed the same bright-eyed enthusiasm as before. He was adapting to the weight of everyday life. The grind of marriage after the honeymoon glow has faded. He thought it was natural. He thought the shine of the beginning was supposed to dull over time. I, on the other hand, felt the emptiness grow. The guilt no longer motivated me to be better. It became a heavy cloak I dragged with me every single day. And with the growing distance between us, the old, familiar thoughts began to return. The feeling of wanting to be desired by others. The need to confirm my value through admiring looks and easy compliments. I started dressing up more for work again. I responded to messages from old contacts I had muted. I agreed to attend happy hours with colleagues I had stopped seeing. It's important to keep good relationships with the team, I'd tell Silas, a little too casually. And he believed me. He kissed my forehead and told me to have fun. He was never the jealous type. His trust was still a vast, open ocean, and I was preparing to get lost in it all over again. Griffin, my coworker, was bolder than the others. He always had been. Ever since the days when I was still just engaged, he had shown an interest that was more than professional. After I got married, he stepped back a little, but he never disappeared completely. He was always there, on the periphery, with a knowing smile or a lingering look. When he noticed I was becoming more receptive again, more open, he intensified his approach. The compliments became more personal. He used any excuse to touch my arm or my back. He created situations where we could be alone, even for a few moments, in the break room, or walking to the parking garage. I hesitated at first. I really did. I kept a polite distance. But I stayed around, not because I actually wanted anything with him. Not really. But because I liked the feeling of power it gave me. The idea that I was still desired, that I could still command that kind of attention, fed my ego. It was a balm on the days when Silas came home from a long shift and barely had the energy to listen to what I was saying. The messages with Griffin became frequent. They started during work hours, harmless banter about projects and office gossip. Then they continued late into the night, laughter, teasing, suggestive comments that I would read and then quickly delete. We hadn't met outside of work yet. Not in that way. But I had already crossed a line. I knew it. I'd come home from work, curl up on the couch next to Silas, and lie there with my phone in my hand, smiling at jokes he would never understand. I'd feel his warmth beside me, hear the steady rhythm of his breathing as he fell asleep, and I couldn't disconnect from that double life that was slowly, insidiously regaining its shape. One weekend, I made up a story about visiting my mom. I said she wasn't feeling well and needed me for a couple of days. Silas believed it without hesitation. He helped me pack a small bag. He bought me flowers to take to her. Later that day, he sent me a message saying he missed me already, and that he hoped I rested well. I spent the entire Saturday at a hotel bar downtown, drinking with coworkers, exchanging loaded glances with Griffin, flirting with the idea of repeating past mistakes. I didn't go all the way, but I went far enough. I let him kiss me in the hallway outside my room before I said goodnight. It was a thrill, and it was sickening, all at once. When I returned home on Sunday evening, I acted like nothing had happened. I put on a cheerful face, told Silas my mom was feeling much better, and prepared his favorite dinner as if it was just another regular Sunday. What I didn't realize, what I refused to see, was that I was going back to the exact same place I had promised myself I would leave behind. Everything I swore to abandon on my wedding day was now here again, disguised in new versions, under new excuses, but with the exact same selfish intentions. I still believed I was in control. I believed that Silas would never find out. I believed that as long as I maintained appearances and offered a few affectionate gestures, a warm meal, a loving kiss, everything would stay okay. But this was only the beginning of a cycle, a downward spiral that would soon become impossible to hide.